Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is starting to show signs that it's going to be an absolutely insane set. Wizards of the Coast has just spoiled one of the major characters from the storyline. And not only does it offer up some interesting story questions, but the card itself is very, very busted.
Magic. I am a wizard! History. I'm an old wizard! The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered to discuss some Kamigawa Neon Dynasty spoiler goodness. And as I said, it touches on both the story and being very busted in terms of the card itself. So, first things first, what we're going to do is take a look at the card, and then we'll go over all the background flavor and story that goes along with it. So, upon the screen, you shall see an Umezawa. Specifically, this is Satoru Umezawa. Now, the Umezawas have been a part of Magic the Gathering since 1994, but their timeline is very weird, and we'll dive into that. But the card itself, starting out here, is 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 generic mana for a 2/4 legendary human ninja. Now, ninjas featured very prominently in the previous Kamigawa block, so seeing ninjas come back makes perfect sense. And Satoru is essentially like a crime lord, and in this capacity, he also functions as a ninja lord. So taking a look at his ability, it says, whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, first things first, I do want to point out that Wizards' new wording or whatever, it does feel a little bit strange when you have the phrase, whenever you do this, you can do this, but you can only do it once. So, it's like the first time you use an ninjutsu ability in a turn, really, whatever. I mean, that's getting nitpicky, but it is kind of funny, the wording of the ability. Now, if you don't actually know what ninjutsu is because you're newer to Magic, there are a number of ninjas in Magic the Gathering. They have the ability called ninjutsu. And how it works is when you're attacking with a creature and that creature is unblocked, if you have a creature with ninjutsu in your hand, then you can pay the ninjutsu cost and basically swap the creature. So you take the creature that's in play and attacking, you put it back into your hand, and you take the ninjutsu card and you place it into play attacking, all right? And you're already past the blocker step, so your opponent has no ability to block creatures that have been put out with ninjutsu. So the idea, I guess, is supposed to be with the original creature you have out, it's running along, whatever it is, and it goes, surprise, I was actually a ninja. So you could have like a grizzly bear loping across the field and saying, I'm not going to block that bear. Oh, bad news for you. It stands up. Check it out. It's actually a full-on ninja. It was never a bear. It's like a silly, fun kind of concept. But basically, anytime you use a ninjutsu ability while you have Satoru out, you get to look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put 1 of them into your hand. So every time you ninjutsu, not only are you getting the creature you brought back off the board into your hand, but you're getting another card. So you end up gaining card advantage from this. And that's not all Satoru does. The rest of his ability is where it gets really crazy. And that is each creature card in your hand has ninjutsu 1 black, 1 blue, and 2. This means you can put any creature from your hand directly into play, tapped and attacking after your opponent has chosen not to block. And it doesn't matter like which creature he chooses to block. Everything in your hand has ninjutsu, which means he can't let anything through, or any creature could turn into anything from your hand for 4 mana. We're going to see people slapping down Blightsteel Colossuses because they're 11/11 poison. Boom, you instantly win. We're going to see people slamming down Emrakuls with this as well, right? We're going to see big, huge creatures, not in standard. Let's be very real about that. In standard, you'll have to use the big creatures that are available. But I have a very, very strong suspicion that Satoru here is going to cause some serious problems in standard. He I feel like he should be a mythic rare, right? Like looking at him, I'm like, dude, they gave him 4 toughness, so it's so much harder to get rid of him. 3 toughness and less is a lot easier to deal with than 4 toughness. So they made him super resilient in that regard. And the fact that everybody gets ninjutsu, it's crazy. You give everybody ninjutsu, and then on top of that, oh, by the way, are you ninjutsuing? Well, here, have more cards. Not even just draw a card. Look at the top 3 cards of your deck and pick which one to put into your hand. It's absolutely wild. This card is bonkers. And I really, really like the artwork, right? You've got Satoru here, and he's sitting kind of like on a darkened throne with these commies floating around. But if you look in the background, like in the front, you have what feel like more like harmless kind of commies, all right, whatever. But in the background, look at the big hulking demons. There's this symmetrical feel to it, right? On one side, you've got the pink. On one side, you've got the green. It all ties together. You've got like the neon lights kind of emanating off of the sides of the artwork onto his shoulders as he's kind of hunched forward, I suppose, contemplating his empire. Now, we actually have multiple variations in terms of artwork to look at. So before we get into the story, let's take a look at the other ways this card can show up. So we've got the ninja frame version of it, which is just what I'm calling it. I'm not sure is it a shinobi frame? But to me, it definitely has that ninja vibe, right? Look up at the top, the way they've done the legendary border. It's like little kunai spikes sticking up along the top with actually what looks like the top of like maybe a Shinto temple or something. This is actually a really cool legendary frame design overall. I'm not sure exactly what the gold parts of it are supposed to be. This set seems to have a fair number of different treatments, right? Now, in the artwork, you can see Satoru here. It's like, I don't know, is he encapsulated in some kind of bubble of magic? I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure what's going on here, but I'm actually showing you the cards in order of preference for me in terms of the artwork. The first one has my favorite artwork. This one, artwork is okay. The only reason it makes it into second place is take a look at the third one. I don't like this art. This version of Satoru, I don't like the way he looks. He doesn't even feel like a human in this one. He actually feels like a metallic demon. So I guess in terms of like intimidation value, if you want to intimidate your opponents, maybe, but I don't know. There's just something about the way he looks. You know what it is? I've just realized. It makes me think of like a Guyver suit. Do you know that movie Guyver? It's kind of giving me that vibe, right? Now, this is totally going to be a matter of taste. We're talking about aesthetics here, right? So if you like the way this looks, that's cool. It's whatever. This is actually the buy a box promo. So if you want to snag it up, just buy yourself a box. You'll get this copy. I, for one, will be happy that it won't be showing up in any of my booster packs. So that's the card itself. Like I said, feels very busted to me. But the story behind it is very intriguing as well, because the Umezawas, like I said, have been around since Magic, like 1994 is when we first saw them in Magic the Gathering. But we didn't really have a story for them, because the first Umezawa we saw, we got no background story for as well. That was Tetsuo Umezawa. He was in the original Legend set. We had no idea what the deal with him was until later on down the road, basically. So the first Umezawa we ever encountered was Toshiro Umezawa. And he was a black-aligned legendary, and basically he was like a rogue, right? Like he was a good guy, but at the same time he was a villain. He was one of those villainous good guys where you're like, you're on his side, but at the same time he's not a good dude. So after the story that goes through the whole Kamigawa block, which we will cover on my Fantasy Geographic channel, so if you want to hear all the old school Kamigawa lore, that will eventually make its way over there. Right now we're working on the Brothers War story, but Kamigawa will be coming. So in the Kamigawa storyline, Toshiro makes his way through that whole storyline, but at the end of it, he essentially ends up making the Black Myojin, the Myojin of Knight's Reach. He really, really upset that Myojin. And the Myojins are otherworldly spirits that have high levels of power. So the Myojin basically blinded Toshiro. It blinded him and flung him off of Kamigawa all the way to Dominaria. So he ends up on Dominaria, and even though he's blind and whatever, he doesn't end up running into tragedy. He manages to survive and start an entire family line. Toshiro, from the original Kamigawa block, is like the great ancestor of Satoru here. And we go through a number of these different like people from his family. And what's curious to me is how you start out with Toshiro. He gets sent over to Dominaria blinded, starts his own family, but it's not a prestigious family. It's not a rich family or anything like that. In fact, his direct next descendant was just some peasant, right? Just, hey, a whatever peasant. And then you kind of progress through the 1,000 years of like history, or it's 1,200 years, isn't it? I think it's 1,000 to 1,200 years between when Toshiro originally appears and when we get to Satoru. And in the meantime, you have sent to Dominaria, become a peasant, like basically fall all the way from grace, but then the family actually becomes established and moves back up the chain. So Tetsuo Umezawa, who we saw originally in Legends, he actually turns out to be a high-ranking servant of the empire. Like he becomes basically like like a high-ranking imperial bodyguard. His job is to protect the empire, and he's like trying to protect against threats like Nicol Bolas, right? So there's like a lot going on with the Umezawa family line. So you get Tetsuo there, and then you move even further down along the line, and we see another Umezawa, this one again set on Dominaria, because remember, that's where the majority of the Toshiro, the Umezawa bloodline ends up, is on Dominaria. So then you get Tetsuko, who was the crazy little, I can make all your small little guys unblockable from Dominaria character. You might remember that. People liked using it with the, what was that rat? There was one of those rats in Dominaria, the kind of rats where the more you have out, the bigger their power gets. They've made so many different versions of like Plague Rat, Relentless Rat, I don't know, whatever else rats. So you combine these rats with this chick here, and boom, now all of a sudden all you guys can get through unblockable. And that's because Tetsuko has some kind of dimension door ability, right? Like basically the ability to create like dimensional portals that people can travel through to get to different areas of Dominaria. But it's like there's a certain level of power that you can only go through with, right? Because Tetsuko can't handle like big creatures, so they have to be small. I guess Tetsuko can only open up small portals. But Tetsuko is the last person that we see from the Umezawa bloodline on Dominaria. And then you flash forward to now, and now all of a sudden we're on Kamigawa in current day, and you have Satoru Umezawa here. But how did he get here, right? His bloodline was transported over to Dominaria. It's not like, he's not the descendant of like one of the other Toshiro's like uncle or brother or whatever. He's like a direct, as far as I understand, he's a direct descendant of Toshiro Umezawa. So what happened to get from there to here? How did the Umezawa bloodline make it back to Kamigawa? How long ago? How long did it take? Like, did they come back as like heroes? Like, check it out, we were like imperial servants in the other world and we're a big deal. Did they come back like quietly? Do people remember the name of Umezawa and revile him? So Satoru actually ends up a criminal because he has no choice, because his name is basically like got this black mark on it because of what happened in the ancient past. It's really interesting to note that Toshiro was a rogue. He was a criminal, but not necessarily automatically a bad guy. So you start out on the crime side, and then they go to Dominaria, and basically, like, first of all, they just become peasant farmers or whatever, but then they ultimately become what would be considered like honorable, respectable members of society in Dominaria and build themselves up. And then all of a sudden, now back on Kamigawa, we have a return to criminality. So I am genuinely curious as to what this progression is. I mean, I don't know how much we're going to get to see this, right? Because I'm not sure exactly how central Umezawa is to the story. But Umezawa is in charge of the Heisekin Raiders. I'm probably mispronouncing the name. But anyways, he's in charge of a criminal organization, right? And they all have magical runes bound into their bodies. And these runes require that they avenge the deaths of anybody who's part of their organization. And also, if you betray the organization, then the magical sigil will essentially eat you away and destroy you. So it's a pretty crazy organization. And it's one that actually existed back in the earlier days of Kamigawa. So the group that he is in charge of is a clan of criminals that has been around for like 1,000 years. When you go back in time, you have old like who was it? Like Kiku, stuff like Kiku's Night Flower and stuff like that. All these like sort of old members existed from the old Kamigawa in this organization, and now it exists in the current modern like Japan style. Well, it's not Japan, obviously. Kamigawa is the next closest thing, but you get what I'm saying. We've got like a modern world here. So I'm curious to see how this is all going to spin out, because Umezawa is in charge of that gang, and Kaido is part of that gang, but he's going to leave and betray the gang. So I imagine they're going to pursue him, and I expect Satoru to be like the main villain of the Kamigawa story. We'll see though, because we are going to bring in Planeswalkers, so it could turn out that Tezzeret is actually the deal, man with the metal arm behind Umezawa. But either way, there's a lot going on here. I'm very curious. Let me know your thoughts, my friends. I'm going to leave links on the screen to some fun videos. Big thank you to all my patrons, and I will see you all again soon, my friends. If I don't see you before, have a Merry Christmas.